Hello, everyone. Welcome to MCC. I'm your host, Isaac Mack. Joining me today is a very good friend of mine, Mr. Lisi Tonga. Lisi is a Hawaiian-born Melburnian now, and you can tell by the beanie on his head he's a Melburnian. He has an amazing story of self-transformation. I'm really pumped that he's joined us today to talk about how he went from a life of addiction to a life of service. And he runs his own page called Conquer Your Addictions, where he shares daily inspirational vlogs, and he's in the process of also publishing a book. So Lisi, welcome, brother.
Thank you very much. Just excited to be here. Excited to be with you, actually. And yeah, it's been a while since you and I have actually caught up. So it's really good to see you, and it's good to be here in this kind of a platform.
I was going to say it's been a while between drinks, but you don't drink.
I think maybe you've had a drink, but maybe I had a Sprite or something like that. But yeah, it has been a while.
Hey, I know recently I saw you, because we're Facebook buddies still and all that. You had a nasty injury where you ruptured your Achilles.
Yeah.
How's that healing up? You're all good?
Not really. I'll just show you because I can probably lift my foot up this high anyway. But
all right. Is this part of your plan to get out of housework or?
Well, lucky for me, I have such an amazing wife.
Yeah.
She's just been amazing throughout this whole ordeal. I've been pretty much useless.
Really?
But my Achilles is going to take some time to heal. I don't know if you know anyone that's had this type of an injury.
Yeah, it's not an overnight job.
Nah. And, I've learned a lot about this injury since then. And it's going to take another, I'd say 8 months or so before it gets back. 8 months to a year before it actually gets back to where it was. And even at that point, I don't know if it'll ever be the same, because you know how things are after major injuries like that. It doesn't always get back to normal.
You're right, because it gets better.
I certainly hope so. I mean, I'm not sitting around on my I'm not sitting around on my hands, but I should have thought carefully before I went into that day playing basketball for a while. I'm trying to be 19 and I'm not 19 anymore.
That's what happened.
Exactly.
Well, I hope you heal up real quick, man. A lot quicker than the doctors say.
Yeah, likewise.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, I'd like to get right into it because I know, we worked together and that's how we met back in Melbourne. And I remember we went sort of separate ways from there, and you were inspired not so long after that to, start to help young people and just people in general overcome their addictions and live a life of freedom. How did you get? Where do I start with this? I'll ask you why you actually did that, but how did you get yourself in that mess in the first place? Because I remember when I met you, you were like a, kind of mellowed out guy and, pretty chilled. And then when you told me about your, I suppose, past life, I was like, wow, I never saw that. I never experienced that, Lisi. I always experienced the person that you are today. So how did that all start? Like, how did you get into that sort of life? Did it start with one little thing or?
That's a really good question. It started in my teenage years. I was one of those teenagers that had a lot of anger built up inside of me, and I think a lot of pardon?
I can't relate to that.
Yeah, you're just such a good boy, Z. Yeah, but I think it just starts out with peer pressure, like it does for most teenage kids. It's just that wanting to be accepted, to be validated, and also just being brought up in a home where you're taught like to do the right thing all the time. And then it's like when you see your friends doing all these things and being so free, to do whatever they like, come home whenever they want, drink and smoke, and it looks like so much fun. And here I am in my house, and I've got a curfew, and you know what I mean? I've got to go to church on Sundays. There's no drinking, there's no smoking, and then it's just like, nah, there's too many rules. And it's like I'm missing out on all this fun and all this happiness. And by the way, I could probably get more friends if I just kind of went in that direction, or just accepted some of the things that they were doing, because then I would, they would accept me into their fold, so to speak, and be accepted that way. So that's where it all started. I mean, it didn't get heavy until later on.
And sorry, were you in Australia then?
No, I was in the US back then.
Okay, so it was a lot of peer group pressure.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of that, and also just wanting to be part of the cool kids, just wanting to be accepted.
Yeah.
So it was actually, I would go to school, and I would, they call it sloughing, which is the same thing as wagging.
Yeah.
And so we would go up to the mountains, and that's where I would smoke cigarettes. But I used to love going back to school smelling like cigarettes, because then other people could smell me and be like, oh, he's a rebel. Do you know what I mean? Oh, this guy, he's so cool. He smokes cigarettes.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that's kind of where it began.
Okay. And then and you were saying, when did it get serious though?
I think the ball started rolling in that direction when I moved out of my parents' house. There was a period of time where I was trying to sustain that kind of a lifestyle, smoking and drinking. I would still come home. But in my house, because we had a set of rules, I was trying to bring a new set of rules into the house, and that didn't gel well.
Yeah.
And so, it came to a point where my parents said to me, look, you can't live your lifestyle the way that you're living and bring that into this home, because that's not how we do things here. So you have a choice. You can either abide by the rules that we have here, or you can go and live somewhere else.
Yeah.
And at that stage, I kind of had a lot of animosity towards my parents. There was a lot of rebelling going on, and I remember just getting kicked out of my house all the time. But what I would do is I would go sleep on a neighbor's lawn, and then come back the next day, and my dad would let me in the house. So it was like, I'm just going to get a slap on the wrist, and then everything will be fine. But when my mom kicked me out, that was a different story, because then I knew I wasn't going to be able to come back. And then what happened is they changed the locks to the door, to the doors. And I started getting into a lot of trouble. So my dad actually worked in the with juvenile delinquents in a juvenile delinquent center, which he ran. And, it was really ironic, because I ended up getting locked up in my dad's facilities. And then he would have his counselors would come and see me all the time, and they'd be like, you're such an idiot. You know what I mean? Look at what you're doing to your dad. Your dad has worked so hard to support you and to do the right thing for you. And now look at what you're doing to your family name, and you're getting locked up, and you're doing all these stupid things. But at that point, I didn't really care at all.
You wouldn't listen at that point.
Nah. And I was already too far gone. So at that stage, my heart had already turned to stone. And when I left the house, that's when things started to like speed up.
Yeah, right.
Because then it was like, okay, I don't have any rules anymore. I don't have anyone to tell me what to do anymore. And it was almost like I had all this newfound freedom to just do whatever I want. So it was like, oh my gosh, I've always wanted to know what this was like. And I always wanted to know what this was like.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean? And then
this group.
Yeah, because then my head was going all these different places that it had never gone before. And I started thinking about all the things that I'd always thought about but never tried before. And then it actually felt liberating in a way, like to feel like you didn't have anyone over your shoulder like telling you what to do, no parents grounding you or smacking you or whatever. There's no one to tell you what to do. And in fact, before I left my house, I said to my parents, I said, you will never tell me what to do ever again with my life. Pardon me. And from that point, I still remember it. They have never told me what to do from that actual point.
Wow.
And then at that point, I left home for a long period of time, and then started hanging out on the streets. Started running with the street crews, and actually, I have a lot of friends. A lot of my closest friends today I met on the streets.
Right.
Living that street life. So it was like,
And they've turned their life around as well, or
well,
not all?
no, not all, because it's really weird. Because when I was going back to the U.S., because I would go home like every other year just to visit my family, I
Yeah.
could still go to the same bars and clubs and actually see the same people going there. And it's really interesting, because when I go back to the States, I feel like that period of time that I was away from home, I've changed. And then I go back and then I go back to the same places, and I see the same people sitting in the same bar stools, drinking the same beer, smoking the same weed or whatever. And it's like, it gives me a sense of gratitude that I've actually was able to get out of that space, and even get out of the country, so that I could refocus on myself. But yeah, so some have, and it's really great to see that I have really close friends that have been brought up with less than adequate support, like at home and also in schooling and so on, and still come up and be successful.
Yeah.
And so I'm really proud of those guys. But it's also, on the other hand, really sad to hear when you have a friend that's been lost to suicide, or a friend that's been lost to violence, or do you know what I mean? Drugs, and then also a lot of them being locked up in prison. A lot of people that I can't see when I get back home, that are just in and out of the system, that can't get out of it because they're stuck in that loop, which is really to snap out of, really hard, to bring yourself away from once you're stuck in that system.
And there must be a part of you that says that could have been me.
I'm so grateful for the opportunity I had to actually leave the country. And there's a whole story in that as well. But I do know that there are some people, including my family, that believe that if I would have stayed in the U.S., had I stayed and not come out of there, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation right now. And I may have been one of those statistics as well. So, I feel very blessed that I have an opportunity to come out of that space, to be able to reevaluate and redirect my energies into something good, which it didn't happen when I just moved out of the country, because there was still a long period of time before I snapped out of it. But ultimately I did, and I wouldn't have been able to do that had I stayed in the US.
I hear you. So what was, if you don't mind me asking, what were you mainly addicted to?
I don't know if you can say mainly addicted to, because there's just a range of different addictions that are kind of linked together. They come kind of as a whole. So you can say smoking cigarettes or alcohol, or smoking weeds, or doing harder drugs, but you can also say like sex, you can say pornography, you can say all these other vices. They kind of all are
Intertwined.
intertwined. so I don't know that there's one thing that you could say that that was harder than the other, because I kind of had this full um, full on kind of personality. Like
Yeah. You had to.
I
Uh,
yeah, it's just had to be all of it together. Because I really couldn't separate all of it, because it was all kind of intertwined. All of it all came as a bundle.
was there a point where you knew you needed help? Was there?
I always knew that I needed help, but I think part of the problem with addicts is that they stay out of their reality for a reason, because they don't want to see what their true reality looks like.
Okay.
So if I stay in the space where I'm I'm actually completely sober, I can actually see my reality for what it is, and that can be very
Confronting.
hard on you. Yeah, confronting, depressing. You don't want to know that. Do you
Mm.
know what I mean? You would rather stay away from that realization that you have a problem. So if you're an addict, this is a really big, this is one of the big challenges with addicts, is that they don't want to know that they're addicted.
Mm.
And the only way that you're not going to know if you're addicted or you have a problem is if you stay out of your reality.
Okay.
Can you see how that actually keeps people in that zone where they continue to partake and to abuse, because they need to numb their senses so that they don't see their true reality?
And they keep themselves in a denial.
Yeah, and they keep themselves in that denial. I mean, they don't even have to deny it, because they don't even know what's happening.
Okay, that's a good point.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's almost like in an unconscious space where you don't have to think about it,
Mm.
because denying it still means that you have to you have to think about it, and there
Mm.
has to be something in your head that says what you're doing is wrong for you to deny that. That's still too much.
Mm.
You want to stay out of that space where you can get into denial, and the only way to do that is to stay unconscious, and the best way to do that is to keep feeding your addictions.
Um, how did you get out of it?
Ooh.
Was it a light bulb moment or was it a long
It
process?
was I think it was a process for me. I
Okay.
think there was a time frame. I think that I reached a point in my life. Actually, there was a series of things that happened. We were selling at the timeshare presentation.
Yeah.
Um, so if I can can I tell this story, Z?
Sure.
So my background, my is LDS. So I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, right?
Yep.
That's how I was brought up. So in my home, we had a very strong foundation, a spiritual foundation, a family unit that was very well connected. And when I left that lifestyle, that part of me never really left. It always stayed with me. So at a timeshare presentation, I was doing a tour, and the couple that I was doing a tour for saw the picture that I had on my desk, and it was a picture of me and my nieces and nephew in front of the temple, right? In front of one of our temples
Mm.
in Salt Lake City. And they pointed at the picture and said, are you LDS? And I was like, I didn't know what to say, because I've been out of that for so long, because I was about 35 at the time,
Yeah.
or 34 at the time. And they're like, I was like, well, my family is, but I'm not, I don't do that anymore. So they're like, oh, okay. So anyways, I didn't sell him, by the way. I had her, I didn't have him, but he took my number and then he gave it to some missionaries.
Oh,
And I don't know if you know, our church has a lot of missionaries that go around the world spreading the gospel. But the missionaries started calling me, hammering my phone, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, bro! They're just like bugging big time." And actually, I would see sometimes I would be at parties and I'd be ripped out of my head, and they'd be calling me on my phone. I'm like, I'm not talking to these guys right now. But eventually, I had them come over to my house because in my house we had like this open door policy for missionaries when I lived at home. So because we know these missionaries are traveling all around the world, they're away from their families.
okay.
So we always brought them into our homes to feed them. So I thought the least I could do was actually feed them.
Yeah.
That's okay. I can feed you, but let's not go into the whole, churchy thing because I'm not going in that direction, whatever. Anyways, I invite them into my home and they just kind of bore down in like some pure testimony to me about the the reality of God, and these things really hit hard to me um, in this one moment. And anyways, they left and I continued on with my life, but um, they kept calling me and all these other things. But I started to think about the position where I was at in life, and it made me look at myself to be more introspective
Yeah.
and to see where I was at in my life. So I was 35. I was selling timeshare. Um, I'm living for the moment. I'm only making money to support my addiction. I don't have a family. I don't have any I don't have any real ambition. I didn't have none of that. And then and I remember when I was going back to the US, and every time I visited the US, I'd always stay with my sister. And my sister, she stayed strong in the gospel. Her husband and her family, 4 kids, um, all very, well mannered, like the most amazing kids. And I just loved spending time with them. And I love spending time with my family as well. But whenever I went and visited at home, I always, those feelings that I get when I'm around them, they
Mm.
made me I could recognize that those were feelings that I had when I was growing up in Tonga in the islands. And it made me look at my life and think, what do I want to have a family? Well, why don't I have a family? And it started to make me think, oh, I really want to have a family. And so you have those yearnings to have a family. I know you're a family man, Z, and there was a point when I was 35 years old where I was like, look, I'm lonely. I wasn't lonely,
Mm.
but I didn't have a missus. I didn't have any direction. I didn't have a career path. I had no ambition, none of that. I was just living for the moment. And I'm like, how am I going to actually snap out of this?
Mm.
And so the only thing I could really think of is the time when I was growing up with my family in the islands and how safe I felt and how much love there was in our home. Um, and those things started nagging at me day by day by day. So there was maybe a period of months where I would have these yearnings. They would be stronger on some days than others, but I would be purely focused on those feelings that I had when I was with my family and just starting to think I need to have a family. And then I had to start thinking, okay, my lifestyle, the way I'm living it now, I don't know how I'm going to get out of it. Because there was a point that I got to where I thought, I'm not going to ever, I'm never going to be able to get over these addictions.
Mm.
How am I actually ever going to do this? Because it felt like I was in a downward spiral with a weight on my legs, like going into a black hole. I just did not see a way
Mm.
for me to come out of it. And so when those kind of feelings are very despondent, very depressing, very hard. It's a very hard reality
Mm.
to focus on.
So
or
did you
when,
go, sorry,
sorry, go on.
from there, did you go through like almost like a point of depression when you realized where you were at? And then did you have to get to that in order to go, all right, well, I want to change my life?
There was, yeah, you have to get to a very low point. You got to get
Yeah.
to a rock bottom. And with addicts, at the end of the day, it's really up to the addict whether they're going to change or not. It's, no matter how much everyone around them rallies around them and loves them and supports them, it's ultimately going to be up to the person to make that decision, the addict itself to themselves to get over it. So
What I
yeah,
will
go
take,
on.
sorry, from that is, your parent did something amazing for you. They gave you a good home where there was love, and that's something that stuck with you even throughout your lowest points. And it's interesting how that was the thing that inspired you to get out of it. And it just goes to show how important it is in this today's day and age, where we live in such a crazy world with so much distraction, how important it is now that we're both parents. And there's a lot of parents out there, especially dads that will listen to this, how important it is for us to give our kids a very stable, loving, home full of blessings.
Look, I put it down to the way that I was raised. I know that in the Bible it says that, you teach a child the way that they should go and they'll never leave it. And I believe that 100%. And I think that the foundation that my parents had built in the home where we could have the Spirit of God in our home,
Yes.
and we had that, that family unity, those things stayed with me. And for me, when I was going through my head and thinking about what do I want in my life,
Mm.
I'm thinking I want to have a family. And then so I start asking myself a series of questions like, okay, if I want to have a family, what kind of a family do I want? And then I just start thinking, I want a family like how I was raised. That's the kind of family that I want. So how do I get that? Well, I've got to stop doing what I'm doing. So how do I stop doing what I'm doing? Well, I work on Sun. I said, how do I do that? And the answer is really, I've got to go back to church. And so I said, okay, how can you go back to church? Well, I work in timeshare and I work on Sundays. So they're not going to change their way of doing things for you. So you're going to have to leave the industry. And
Good.
that same week that I came to that realization, and I still remember the day, I went into work and I said, I need to resign and I need to do it today because I need to pick up my pieces and move my life in a different direction. Being in this, I can't work on Sundays because I need to start focusing on my spiritual side.
Mm.
And I want to go back to church to be able to do that. And I also need to sort my life out. And they were very good with me and helping me to draw up the papers and all of that. So I think that was on a Thursday night. And on that Sunday, I went to church, and then I never stopped going to church after that. So that was when it actually started. Yeah, but there was like a period of time where I had to go through this like soul searching and these, and maybe God put those people in my way on a presentation so that I could give them my numbers so they could give it to the missionaries so they could keep bugging me so they could end up in my house so they could make me feel the Spirit so I could start looking in that direction and start thinking. I remember that feeling and I remember how safe that felt, how much peace that was, and it made me yearn for that. And then so I started to ask myself those questions that would eventually get me to the answers that I needed to be able to make those decisions I needed to get on that path. And even when I made that decision to start going back to church, that didn't change any. Like, it's not like you go and turn off your addictions like that. Just because you're going to church doesn't mean anything. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm saying to myself, whoa. I'm going to church, that's fine, but I'm not quitting anything. I never said anything about that. I just said I was going to go to church
Yeah.
because this is how I'm justifying keeping my vices, you know what I mean? Because they're like your security blanket.
Yeah.
They're like you need them to kind of feel whole in a way. You know what I mean? So even after that, there was another process that I had to go through before I reached the stage where I made a solid commitment and could stick to it.
So you looking back now, you could obviously, and it's easy to say that you were obviously filling a void that whole time. And is that fair enough to say? And it was a void of not having God in your life, number one, and lacking vision for what you really wanted. Were those things?
Yeah, I would say not having a vision, not having any real ambition.
Mm.
I guess you could call that a vision because I didn't really think too much in front. Like I wasn't really thinking of a family. I wasn't really thinking about buying a house.
Yeah, so it's a
You
lack of
know, yeah, I had none of that. So for me, it was like I just want to get high so I can go out with my friends so that we can mingle with our networks or meet other people that are involved in the same kinds of same lifestyle
mm.
so that we could um you know so that we can have shenanigans or whatever. That was really it seemed like it was the only goal I had in my life was just to do that.
I don't know if you'd be able to give advice to people that are within our own Christian community in Sydney and Melbourne. Uh, and I'll give you an example and tell me if you, but I think you'd be able to speak into it in some way. So there are, and in particular, it's fathers and, men, and these are fighting men that have come from Iraq. So fighting men, I mean, men that have been in war for a lot of their life, and they've migrated to Australia. They've got a young family, a lot of them, and tragically, they're going from a life where they're fighting for their lives and they're fighting for their, families, and they've got purpose over there.
Right.
Interesting. They've got a purpose, which is
Yeah.
to protect, to do all these things. And what's happened is, and they've come to Australia, they don't have to worry about protecting their family anymore. They're not carrying around guns. They they've and they actually lose a lot of that purpose,
Yeah.
which is a bit strange to them. And they've grown up in church like you and I grew up in church as kids, and that's been a part of their life. And sadly, a lot of them are now turning away from their families, away from church, and slowly they start getting addicted to gambling. They start getting addicted to alcohol, drugs, and then they get to a point where they're too embarrassed to talk to anyone about it because it's shameful in
Yeah.
our culture
Yeah.
uh, to even say that you have that kind of problem. There's this, and it's because there's still an old school mentality with, I suppose, the ethnics and whatnot. Would you have anything to say to these men or people like that?
You know,
A tough one, right?
I think you hit the nail on the head though is having a purpose really makes a difference.
Hmm.
If you don't have anything to shoot for, if you don't have anything to really aim for, then what are you aiming for?
Yeah.
Like if you don't have a path of where you're gonna go, you're gonna end up somewhere else. So I guess Z with this one, if you especially if you have people that have come from other countries that have to from a different culture, and then having to leave their culture and live a completely different lifestyle and then lose their whole purpose completely.
Yeah.
That's a challenge in itself. I remember moving from Tonga to the U.S. Tonga's not a third world country, but it's underdeveloped and it doesn't really have freeways and lights and
All
um,
that, yeah.
so when I moved from Tonga to the U.S., it was like I could have made my own Coming to America movie. you know, but there's still this, you know, when you come from one culture and you try to assimilate into another culture,
Hmm.
sometimes being different isn't a good thing, because it's like it's looked down on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And because people don't know who they are, they could, people are ignorant towards them.
Yeah.
But I think it's a lot of that comes from just being not understanding who they are and their culture and where they're from. And there can be issues with people trying to assimilate to cultures or trying to fit into cultures. Um, but I think finding a purpose, Z, is so important, because when you have a pinpoint, something to focus on, you start to get your bearings and and because you're focused on it, you're going to find a way to make it to this purpose. But the purpose has to be something that's, you know, greater than yourself. I mean, I think that for me, my purpose is to help other people not just overcome their addictions, but to live a better quality of life. Because overcoming your addictions is one thing, but overcoming your addictions and living a better life that's going to be full of purpose and meaning, that's a completely different thing.
Well, it's like replacing it with the opposite. I mean,
Yeah,
living.
exactly.
Because when I met you, I mean, we connected well, you know, because we were similar in a sense that we had good habits. We looked after ourselves physically. We went to the gym, you know, ate, you know, pretty good food. We were family men. We looked after our family. And so it's all mainly, and we used to talk about it a lot, positive habits, having positive habits and taking anywhere from 60 to 90 days to develop new habits. So you can call them addictions, you know, I mean, whatever you want to call it, because but it's a different path.
Yeah. I mean, we're all on the addiction spectrum in one way or another. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Even our good habits are addictions.
Yeah.
But I really want to go back to the guys that you're talking about, because I feel like,
What about the ones, sorry, that are too embarrassed to talk about it because they think it's shameful?
yeah, I think that is the one thing with addiction, is it does carry that stigma that it's shameful, that it's embarrassing, that people are gonna look down on you, and
Yeah.
they're gonna, you know, you're gonna compromise the way that people perceive you.
Mm.
And I think this is the biggest reason that stops people or prevents people from actually opening up about what the issues are. So they do all that they can to hide it.
And
Um,
men in particular, right?
in men in particular, because they're the strong role model.
Yeah.
Nothing can hurt them or penetrate them. And they need to show that front for their families, for their friends. It takes, and you know, vulnerability isn't a weak thing. It requires strength for you to be vulnerable. You know what I mean? It requires courage for you to be vulnerable. And people look at vulnerability as weakness, and that's the misconception that people have about the two.
Mm.
And I think that if people can come to a point where they can just swallow their egos and just you know, humble themselves and just you know, acknowledge, hey, I have an issue, um, I have a problem, and I need to get this out, and I need to talk to somebody about it because I need to get help on it. That's really the the first step, which is a really tough step for people to do, is to acknowledge that they have a problem.
Yeah.
You know, acknowledging that they have a problem, but also being able to share that with somebody else. Because I think that there are a lot of people who are addicted and know that they're addicted, know that it's a problem, know that they want to get over it, but they're not willing to talk to anyone about it because they might think, oh, I can actually come through it on my own. I'm strong enough still
Yeah.
to do this on my own. And that becomes problematic and can be really dangerous, especially if it goes under the radar without being recognized or seen by anybody,
Mm.
because then it manifests in different ways. As an example, a car accident, or because you've been drinking too much, or you're going home to tell your wife, hey, we won't be able to pay our mortgage this month because I've just blown it all at the casino. Do you know what I mean? Um, you know, Vegas is a place where it's a big city of lights and it's all glitz and glamour. But what they don't show you are the people that are being drug out of the casinos that have just spent all the money on their, you know, their life savings and lost their homes and lost all of their wealth. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? They don't
Yeah.
show you those things. And people, I think if they're addicted and most of them are pretty switched on, they'll find ways. They're cheeky. They'll find ways to hide their addictions, but then they'll ultimately manifest anyway. So I guess that would be a good thing, Z, is that you know, if you're listening to this and you have a gambling problem, a drinking problem, those things are going to manifest in one way or another.
Mm.
If you're hiding it.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Sadly, it's even come out in some areas in domestic violence. So it's
yeah,
yeah, it's coming out in the wrong ways.
yeah, exactly. And it's ugly when it manifests that way. Your best bet is to do it now while it's still manageable, but get out there and tell somebody now. Don't delay that any longer. Find someone who you trust. Find somebody who is in authority, like a counselor, like a pastor, a priest, a bishop, whomever you can confide in, good friend, someone that you trust, and just tell them what you're having problems with and issues with, and get that help that you need. But you need to, you need to do that. You need to acknowledge that that's a problem.
Yeah.
You need to tell somebody about it.
Well, I think one of the greatest advices that I had was from my uncle. And I remember there was a point in my life where I didn't know what it was. I was having panic attacks. I didn't even know what a panic attack was. It was weird to me. And it's because I was stressing myself out so much about
Yeah.
just all sorts of things. And I remember I was like really shaken up one night and I was sitting down talking to him. And I said to him, I can't figure it out. Why is it that I'm so good at helping other people solve their problems, but I can't solve mine?
Mm.
And he said to me something that has stuck to this day. He said, if you think about a brain surgeon, the greatest brain surgeon in the world, he said, do you think that that brain surgeon can operate on himself? And I said, well, of course not. He said, well, it's no different for a psychologist. The greatest psychologist in the world, the greatest mind in the world, can't operate on himself.
Yeah.
He'll have to get advice from someone.
From someone else.
And we as human beings, that's the only way we can solve our own problems is actually to open up.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, it's hard for us to see everything. You need an outside perspective, somebody with an unbiased perspective that can see things from another viewpoint,
correct.
so that they can help you to understand better the circumstances that you're in. You
Mm.
only have a one view. You need people around you to be able to show you other views, and to help you to correct that.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, no, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
We all need help. It's even the smartest people in the world. They're surrounding themselves with smarter people than them because that's how successful people are. They become successful not because of their own brains. They've got to where they've got because they've surrounded themselves with people who were better than them,
Yeah.
smart, that could see things that they couldn't see and help them to be able to see other perspectives and understand what's happening from all angles.
Excellent. And going back to, so with your transformation, you started going back to church. Slowly but surely, you replaced all your addictions with good habits. You started looking after yourself. And sooner or later, you met your future wife. Was that
Yep.
at church as well?
Was that what?
Was that at church?
No, it wasn't. Look, there's a story here, Z.
Okay, that's right. Well,
Is
maybe
that all
that.
right?
Hey,
Do you want me to tell you a story or
real quick, yeah.
real quick? When I first came back to church, I was praying to God, okay, look, I've made the right decision to go to church. You need to bless me with the woman.
Negotiations.
Yeah, so I was like, hey, I made a good move, so it's your turn to. And besides that, I actually need a woman to be able to help, to give me direction, to help me to aspire to want to be better. Because I still had all my issues. And I just thought that having a good girl that was already above where I was, it would help me to, do you understand what I mean? It would give me the encouragement and the motivation I need to correct all my issues.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
But God said no.
Doesn't work like that.
It doesn't work like that. And I actually went through an 18-month period of begging, pleading, fasting, and trying to do the right thing before God could bless me with that. But by the time I met Naomi, I was already sober 18 months. So it was about maybe 3 years since I first started asking for her. And that 3 years before that was the worst 3 years of my life. But the way it worked was I didn't have a job at the time, and my bishop from work sent me an email of a sales job because I left timeshare. It was really hard for me to get another sales job. Well, it wasn't hard to get a sales job, but because my skills are transferable, but I kept going from different sales job to different sales job. And I went through maybe about 10 different jobs. And then I get this email. And then I met this, my friend, Mark, who introduced me to, well, he actually hired me on to work with him. And then he introduced me to Naomi. So it was I was actually on a blind date. He just said, he was talking to me. We had a good relationship, and I was just telling him how pathetic my love life was at that particular point. And he was like, look, I might know somebody, leave it with me. So he went to Naomi's parents and got their permission first for them to, if she could, date me. Well, if it was okay with Naomi, and the parents said it was all right. And then so he went to Naomi and asked her, said, hey, I know this guy. And she said, oh, he's a little bit older, but he's all right though. It's like no expectations, just
Interesting.
just whatever happens, but hey, it's a date. So he gave me her number. I called her up. And then obviously I had to stalk her on Facebook, had a couple of conversations with her, and then we had a date. And I was living in St. Kilda at the time, and she's coming to St. Kilda because we're going to walk down the Chapel Street. And before she gets to my house, I'm so nervous, and I'm like, I don't even understand why I'm actually so nervous, because I'm always so well poised in these kind of circumstances, but I didn't realize I didn't understand what was happening to me. And I was just like jittery and all of these other things. I was feeling all these emotions. And then it just dawned on me, I was sober. And, and so when you're sober, you feel all those emotions that you otherwise would have numbed with alcohol or drugs or anything like that. But then when we met, I mean, it was like the connection was instant.
Mm.
And then 3 months after that, we were engaged. And then 6 months later, we got married.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So good. Where we go on from that, we should have some nice music playing in the background.
No, usually that, or it could just have my son Manaya come running in and throwing toys and all that stuff, which is more realistic.
So tell us about your book. Is it about bodybuilding?
You're funny, Z.
I try.
My book is called Conquer Your Addictions. It's 11 unique insights and use of faith-based principles to overcome your demons.
Okay.
So I wrote this. It's a how-to book on overcoming your addiction. So it's a step. It's a step-by-step process. Not really step-by-step process, because it's a reference book, right? So if you have an addiction of some sort, or if you have a certain behavior, you can flick it to the book and you can see um, what I say about behaviors, addictions, and what you can do and use to overcome those addictions that you have. So
Yeah.
I think what makes my book unique is that I've included also some faith-based principles in there that people could use in a practical sense to be able to use to overcome their addiction. So there's the methods that you can use to overcome your addictions, but then there are faith-based principles, like I talk about prayer and I actually go at a step-by-step process on how to pray. And then I also talk about fasting. And then you can, whether you're fasting in a spiritual sense or whether you're just fasting for the sake of the benefit of it,
Yeah.
those are still things that you can use to be able to help you to overcome your addiction. So all of these are proven because I've proved them in my own life. So this book was written based on the way that I came through my own addictions.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so people can look at it and go through it and discover for themselves, hey, look, I have that kind of an addiction. I have that kind of a behavior. Okay, I can try this and I can try this. So it's a practical book that people can pick up and go, yeah, I can try that, and then see the results. But everything that's in this book has been proven because they were methods that I used to be able to overcome my addictions with it.
Well, can you give us a little bit of insight in terms of like going back a little bit? Once you, quit your old sales job, you started going back to church. You were still addicted to, a few bad things back then, but slowly but surely you turned your life around.
Yeah.
You had to replace all those things with some habits. What would you say are the best, most impactful habits that you developed that you still take with you today?
Well, look, so right now, my habits, praying, prayer is an essential habit that I have. It's a everyday, without a doubt. Prayer is a habit that I do no matter what.
Okay.
Reading is also another habit that I do no matter what. So that's both scriptural, so holy scriptures, to get that spiritual enlightenment, and then also just personal development books that I read on a daily basis to help me develop my mind and to develop strategies and different ways to create opportunities. Those things are really important to me. But also on top of that, physical exercise is just something that just goes without saying. I think that when I'm feeding my mind mentally, and when I'm feeding my soul spiritually, and when I'm doing what I need to physically, I just find that when you have those habits that are working on those parts of your soul, it puts you into a flow state. And you know those flow states, right? Where you just, your confidence is beaming, whatever obstacles you can come up with, you know how to confront them, analyze them, tackle them.
Yeah.
You know how to be accountable, accept accountability.
Yeah.
All those sort of things are important for your development. And if you can develop all those three aspects of your life,
mind, body, and spirit,
100%. I mean, and you want that flow state, because because when you're in that flow state, your body's full of light, and it comes off of you, and people can feel that when they're just around you. They just look at you and be like, I don't know what's up with this guy or what he's doing. There's something different.
Yeah.
But that's when you're in the best space to be able to overcome whatever challenge. So it won't matter whether the world is crumbling around you. You're poised, and you're confident in yourself because you know God's got your back. You know that you're doing the right things to put yourself in the right space.
Amen, brother. So tell us about future plans. What's in store for 2021?
So 2021 is just going to be about getting my book out there and published. It's in the editing stages currently at the moment.
Good.
And once it's finished being edited, then it'll go to publishing. In the meantime, it's just so I've had opportunities to be able to speak to large congregations. Most of them have been youth, through church conferences, public schools, and I've had opportunities to speak to them about making good choices. We're actually just talking about choices and consequences. And especially during that stage that they're in currently at the moment, like youth are so, they're in that vulnerable stage right now where they can go either way. They've got peer pressure pulling from one end, and then they got their morals and values pulling on another end, and they get stuck in between. And so, what I'm passionate about is being able to help them to be able to see a few steps in front if you make these other types of decisions. Do you know what I mean? So if you make these the wrong decisions, the consequences are going to look like this.
Yeah.
And so I feel like even though my life and the experiences that I've had have been pretty crappy, they have been a blessing because they've helped me to be able to help other people to be able to make better decisions. And so hopefully, that's really what I'm most passionate about is being able to help other people to avoid making those other types of mistakes that I've made, to avoid that and make better decisions. But then if you have made bad decisions in your life, you're not too far away from changing. And I think that's another misconception that people that are addicted have, is that they think that they're too far gone. If you're listening to this and you have an addiction, that's not true. You're never too far gone to change.
I think if you're still alive, you're not too far gone.
Yeah, 100%. If you're up and if you're breathing right now and you're watching this, you're not too far. You're never too far. And all things are possible. All things are possible. Nothing is impossible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, there's a question that I ask every guest that I have on the show, almost every guest, and that's, if you could jump in a time machine and visit your 18-year-old self, what advice would you have for that person? But it's interesting, I'm happy to ask you that question, but I feel like you're already doing it, because you're going actually talking to the youth and giving them that advice. And
I don't know, Z, because look, I don't see, if I was going to go back and talk to my 18-year-old self, would I change anything that I've gone through? The thing is if I hadn't have gone through all of that, I wouldn't be able to have the experiences and the knowledge that I have and the wisdom that I have to be able to help other people. Do you know what I mean? Because if I would have made better decisions at that point, then my purpose may have changed. You know what I mean? But I've made a lot of bad choices in my life. Like, I burned a lot of bridges, which has really made me sad. People are not in my life anymore because of poor decisions that I've made. And I'm really sad for that. And I take, responsibility and accountability for those actions that I made. But all I can do is do my best to live my life the best I can now to show that I have moved on from that, and I am trying to do my best now to rectify that in the way that I'm living.
Well, you've got a purpose now, and it's a big one. You're a husband, you're a father, you're a leader in the community. You've got a big purpose, so you're doing some great things, brother.
I appreciate that, Z. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Any last thoughts before we let you go?
Look, man, you know what? I feel it on my heart to say that I know one of the things that people have that have addictions have a problem. Part of the problem that they have is they can't actually let go of the networks or the people that they love that are around them that are in the same kind of a lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I think the hardest thing that for me about overcoming my addictions was actually having to separate myself from the people and from the environment that I was in,
Mm.
to be able to go on my journey. But I do know that if you have addictions and they want to overcome their addictions, you need to be able to separate yourself from the people that you are surrounded by that are also involved in that, because you cannot help each other if you're both in the same boat.
Mm.
Um, and so I just feel it on my heart to be able to say, if that's you, have the courage to be able to be on your own.
Mm.
And because being on your own is better than being around people that are going to bring you down.
Yeah.
And I spent a period of time on my own, but I stayed confident in myself because I knew that even though I was on my own for a period of time, I knew it was the right thing to do. And that gave me confidence. It's not like you're just going away from your friends to be alone. You're going away from them for a greater purpose.
100%.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to share.
And I can't agree more. I mean, I can relate so much to even what you said before, before you met your wife. Um, I went through a similar thing where I had to spend some time alone, and and cull a whole heap of friends that were really get no good for me. But spending that time alone and being in that sort of depressive state where I felt like if I meet the right girl, things will be all right.
Yeah.
I went through that, but then one night when I was in my probably darkest moments, it was like a voice in my head, or maybe God speaking to me and said, "If you want to meet the one, why don't you be the one?" And and it was, I don't know if it was exactly said that way, but it was just something clicked, and that was when things started to turn. Started going back to the gym, good habits, prayer, all the habits happened, and then I didn't even think about um, oops, I didn't even think about whether it was I needed a woman in my life or needed a wife or something like that. I started to be in a great state of gratitude. Started counting my blessings every day and just being grateful for the life that I had. Interesting enough, once I got to that sort of state of mind, 6 months later, I meet my future wife, and it just clicked, and it just like almost instantaneously. And similar to you, we were engaged and married in a pretty quick period.
Mm.
And now, like you, we've got a 3-year-old little nut job running around.
You know what? I love that story, Z, because I feel like I didn't come to that realization until after I met Naomi.
Mm.
Because what I understood after meeting her was that God wasn't going to give me just what I wanted straight away. He needed me to become the person that I needed to be for her before he could bless me with her. And you know what was amazing about it was that when I did meet Naomi, I actually felt a peace in me because I knew that I had done the work that was necessary to be right for her. It wasn't like, oh, look at poor me, help me up because I need help right now. It was like, hey, I actually met you at the right time because I have done this work and these hands are clean and I've done the work that's necessary to be the right person for you. And that confidence and that like energy and that spirit, it comes across. Do you know what I mean? And it's undeniable. But there's nothing like having that peace that comes from when you know that God's pleased with the decisions and the way that you've conducted your life.
Well, that's why I've always said to people, for a relationship to work, it's not 50-50. It's 100-100. You've got to be 100% of you, and you have to give 100% of yourself. It's not two people coming in together messed up and somehow you form one person that's all right.
Yeah.
No, you've got to come together in your best form, because when you do that, you create a phenomenal unity
Yeah.
that just that can be, imagine you at your best, but double that.
Yeah.
That's really where it should be at.
Yeah.
That's something
100%, man.
that's something we can always work on. That's a lifelong one.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you there, man.
Well, bro, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. We may get you back because I think I mentioned to you off screen that one of my plans next year is to help even our Christian community in the Iraqis here in Australia, help the ones that aren't really keen to come forward with their gambling problems, with their all these other things, to help them to become better men, in particular for the men of our community, because they're the ones who will never speak
Suffering.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we may get you back on, for some on a panel and to help these guys out. It'd be an honor.
Definitely, bro. Anytime, Z. I appreciate it.
All right, brother. Well, you take care and you heal up. So hopefully we'll see you running the 100 meters again pretty soon.
All right, brother. Take care, man.
Peace, bro.
Much love.